To explore variables and then also the integer type later, let's say we don't want to create hello world right here where we need it, but instead we want to store it in a variable so that we can potentially use it in multiple code lines. Simply because maybe we want to output it twice. Of course, we can just copy and paste this line of code, but then we have the same text twice. And if we ever want to change it, for example, add multiple exclamation marks, we have to do it in two places. And as a developer, we typically want to avoid situations like this. We want to be lazy, and we only want to change it in one place. Because this is error prone, for example, it's easy to forget one exclamation mark. Which in this case here, of course, won't change much, but still it's technically not the same now. That's why we might want to use a variable. We can then store this value in a variable and then use that variable in two different places, but the value is then only created once. And to do that in Go, one way of creating a variable is to use the var keyword, another keyword built into Go. After the var keyword, you define the name of the variable you want to create. And that name is up to you as long as it does not clash with other keywords or packages you might be importing. So here, for example, we could name this greeting text. Now, one word about the naming convention. As you see, I'm writing it like this. This notation is called camel case. And this is generally how you want to name your variables, though it's also not uncommon to start with an uppercase character, and therefore the official naming convention is actually not camel case, which has a lowercase starting character, but mixed case, which has either a lowercase or an uppercase starting character. And this notation with an uppercase or lowercase starting character will become important later again once we talk about modules and packages again. Though you should pick a name that describes the value that will be stored in the variable ultimately. The variable name should be descriptive and explain which kind of value will be inside of that variable. For the moment, I'll go with a lowercase g and name it greeting text. You should not have a white space in there. This would be an error, as you can tell by the red squiggly lines. And you should also not use underscores or dashes. That's all not supported and allowed. You should use this notation instead. Now, after the name of your variable, you then have to define which type of data should be stored in there. Because always keep in mind, Go is a statically typed language, so you have to announce ahead of time which kind of data will be used in a certain operation or will be stored in a variable. And you do define the type of that variable by then adding that type after the variable name. For example, if this variable should hold a string, you would type string here, which is one of the supported types in Go. And here's another important thing. In other programming languages, you often see the type in front of the variable name, like this, or even instead of the var keyword, or something like that. In Go, this is invalid. Instead, the type name has to go after the variable name, so that you have var, variable name, and then variable value type. Now, this creates a variable. It declares a variable, but this variable has no value yet. And we have red squiggly lines because we are declaring it but not using it, which is also something Go doesn't allow, to force you to keep your code clean, and unused variables are something you should not have in your code. But of course we will use it here. For example, we can now assign a value by adding an equal sign after the name, and then we could grab this hello world text, cut it down there, and assign it here. Now greeting text holds hello world. We still have the red squiggly lines because even though I'm adding a value into this variable now, I'm still not doing anything with that variable ultimately. Just storing a value still doesn't justify having that variable. But now we can use that variable down there in println. We can refer to greeting text down there, and now you see the error is gone, because now this variable gets used in this println operation. And println, as a side note, is an operation that works with any kind of values, including strings. So that's why everything here works. And now we can use that same variable in two places. We can also use it here in the second println call. That's the idea behind the variables. If we now save this and we open this terminal again, if we again run this first app.go file, we see hello world twice, and we see, of course, exactly the same text because we are using one and the same variable. Still, this is only one way of defining a variable, and arguably it's a pretty long one. What we do here is we first of all create the variable without a value, and then we assign a value at a later point of time. And sometimes this is what you need in your code. For example, if you need to create the variable in front of some other code where you then decide which value should be stored dynamically. Not what we have here, but what we could have in other programs. Now here, this is too long though. It's unnecessarily long because we assign a value in the next line after creating the variable. So whilst this works, we can use a different way. So we can comment this out by adding two forward slashes. This creates a comment, and commenting out simply means that this code now is still there for us to see, but is not having any effect anymore. And I can show you an alternative, a slightly shorter one. We can also create a variable like we did it before, with the name and the value type. But then we store a value in the same line where we declare it. This is now a bit shorter because it's one line instead of two lines. And that therefore is arguably better. But even that can be shortened. If you instantly assign a value like this, then you can let Go infer the value type. At least very often that is something which you can do. And for this we have a third syntax, which is the most common one for many use cases. You can also create a variable without the var keyword, just by defining the name. And then instead of using an equal sign, you use colon equal sign. And then your value. This also creates a brand new variable. Without the colon, it tries to assign a value to an existing variable, which would fail here because it's an undeclared variable here, since I commented out this code. But with a colon, a brand new variable is created, is declared, and that variable is then also immediately initialized, which means a value is stored inside of it. And we never define that this will be of type string because when using colon equal sign, Go will infer the variable type from the value which you use for initialization. So here we store a string initially, hence Go infers that greeting text will be of type string. And you can see the inferred type if you hover over this variable. Here you see that string was the inferred type. And now with that, if I save this, I can still execute this code as I did before with go run first app go, and I get the same output as before, but now we have this shortest possible syntax. I still showed you the two other approaches because sometimes you also need those. And you'll see examples for when you need those a little bit later once we have more advanced knowledge about Go.